Try this for a deep, dark secret. The great detective show Remington Steele? We don't know if it's feminist. Follow. Detective Laura Holt always loved excitement, so she studied and apprenticed and put her name on an office. But absolutely nobody knocked down her door. A female private investigator in 1982 seems so feminine. So she invents a superior, a decidedly masculine superior. Suddenly there are cases around the block. It was working like a charm. Plenty of stories for her own TV show. Until the day he walked in, with his blue eyes and mysterious past. And before she knew it, he assumes Remington Steele's identity. Now she does the work, and he takes the bows. And often many of the storylines that should be hers become his. It becomes a more traditional show, but as long as people watch, she can play some gender role reversal and give women one of the most powerful female icons of the television 80s. I'm Susan Lambert-Haddam. Welcome to 80s TV Ladies.
And I'm Sharon Johnson. We are kicking off a new female-driven TV show exploration, a show that premiered in 1982. Today, we are diving into one of the most beloved mystery and detective shows of all time, Remington Steele.
I can't wait.
Neither can I. First, we'll be talking about the pilot and a general overview of the show. And we've got some deep, dark secrets, according to Susan.
Well, deep, dark secrets sounded better than some really interesting tidbits you may not know about Remington Steele.
We're going to give you our first impressions, tell you about the stars and guest stars on the show, and let you know about a few really cool special guests that will be coming up on this podcast in later episodes.
This podcast?
This podcast.
Our very own podcast is going to have special episodes?
I know, right?
Oh my God, you guys are going to lose your minds. Okay. All right. So let's take ourselves back to October 1982. When we were youngsters, Epcot had just opened at Disney World. Cats opened on Broadway. The Chicago Tylenol murders had happened, and President Ronald Reagan had declared a war on drugs.
It was the year of the Falkland War. Top TV shows were 60 Minutes, Dallas, MASH, Magnum P.I., Dynasty, which I didn't watch because I'm a Dallas fan.
You had to be. It was Dallas or Dynasty.
It really was.
It was like football.
Exactly. Three's Company, Simon and Simon, The Love Boat, The A-Team were all big shows back then.
All right. I was a big fan of The A-Team at the time, and Simon, definitely Magnum P.I., wanted a Ferrari. Did a little bit of Three's Company, though I wasn't technically allowed to watch it, according to my mother. But then came this new show, Remington Steele. Do you remember it from then, Sharon? And what'd you watch? Did you watch it, and what'd you think?
I do remember it from them. I remember it being one of my favorite shows. I have to say I don't have any real specific memories of watching it at that time. Other than just knowing how much I loved it and how much I look forward to it and just how darn cute Laura Holt and Remington Steele were together.
They were adorable. I also remember it. I also watched it. I loved that style. I love the action comedy. And this was a, sort of mystery action comedy. I love movies, so it sort of satisfied that, and I loved those stars too. They were pretty amazing. They were pretty groundbreaking when they came out. You were like, "Who are these people? These are fabulous people. I want to know and be."
It really ticked off a lot of boxes for me. Some of which you've mentioned. The mystery aspect of it. I love mysteries. I love a good show. I love a whodunit. I always like to try to see if I can figure it out. I love action. I love comedy, and somehow this show managed to find a way to blend all of those things into one show. It was almost like a miracle of television.
I do also remember the score and the tone of the show, because even though it was pretty goofy sometimes, it had a really interesting, warm and serious tone and look of the piece. And then that friggin' amazing, the music for the pilot and the second episode was by Henry Mancini. And he scored two themes for the show, the Remington theme and the Laura theme. And they're really just startlingly great.
Yeah, it's really one of the best TV theme songs of all time. I think it fits the show so well in so many ways. So.
Yeah, and I think it was nice. I feel like it felt, at least to me, a little more sophisticated and interesting than Heart to Heart, which somehow didn't feel. I never really connected with Heart to Heart. although I watched episodes of it.
I don't think I ever watched Heart to Heart.
Well, we're going to have to explore that show, even though I think it technically started in the 70s. It did run through the 80s. All of the shows we're currently looking at, Remington Steele, Scarecrow Mrs. King, and Moonlighting, we're kind of chasing that show, the success of that show. It was very big, very successful. But it felt more like, for me, it felt more like the adult show. It felt more like for my mom, whereas Remington Steele definitely felt more modern to me. Now it feels charming and antiquated a little bit, but holds up really well. So let's talk about how we feel about it now that we've revisited it.
I think it holds up maybe a little bit better than you do, mainly because it is an episodic show. Yes, we have the thread of the will they or won't they, but even that I think they handled in this show much better than it's been handled in most shows that have tried to extend that out over a long period of time. So I give the writers a lot of credit for that. And I think that in some ways, the idea that a woman would have to invent a male boss because people weren't taking her seriously and doing this work that she was so good at, sadly, there's still some things in our world as it exists today where that would also be the case. So that aspect of the show, I think, still holds up and sadly is still kind of a thing in many industries. So I was surprised, frankly, at how well I thought it held up for me in doing as I'm doing the rewatch of the show.
And again, don't get me wrong, I really enjoyed, I'm really enjoying going through this, the entire 5 seasons. And in some ways, again, I do think certain episodes hold up better than certain episodes of Scarecrow Mrs. King. Certainly in terms of a little bit more sophistication in the discussions of the relationship and of the power dynamics in that relationship. I'm surprised. There were a couple episodes I was really surprised where they're articulating what is going on for them in a way that, even though then other times they're sort of, it's hard to track the relationship because you're like, well, it seems like they still like each other. Why are they being mad at each other for the purpose of this episode? At the same time, I do think they were both pretty clear on what they wanted. Mm-hmm. And so it sort of makes you buy it and pretty clear on their fears from that relationship of why they're, both of them are having trouble sort of committing to it, but for different reasons.
That was one of the things that really surprised me in doing the rewatch, because I couldn't think of another show since that handled that as well as this show did, as frankly as this show did almost 40 years ago. It really surprised. And I think for me, maybe that's one of the things that permeates over the show, this idea that these are two grown-up people. They've, very maturely discussed their relationship and the fact that they're both very attracted to each other, but for various reasons, mostly because Laura is more than a little concerned about what she doesn't know about him and what he's keeping from her, and expresses her reservations about that. And I couldn't think of another show that handled a possible romantic relationship so maturely, so calmly, so straightforwardly. And it really amazed me.
Well, certainly at the time. And again, Cheers was around this time too, also dealing with sort of male-female dynamics and a will they, won't they. But you were definitely watching two people who couldn't really talk about why they would or wouldn't. We just knew it as an audience. It was just in the ethos somehow of those other relationships. So yeah, I do think, and what I was saying is I think this show very clearly and directly references The Thin Man and 30s romantic comedies, as well as Heart to Heart. It sort of comments on Heart to Heart. I think it's one of its precursors is The Avengers. That sort of, it's sexy and fun to be detectives and chase things down. The shows that it inspired, obviously, are Moonlighting, which came directly from it. Literally, Glenn Gordon Caron, who was the supervising producer for the first half of the first season, went on to create Moonlighting, the sexier, banterier, crazier version of that. And Castle, I think, has a real nod to this show. Kind of almost any male-female partner exploration. At the very least, they they probably watched at least 1 or 2 episodes of Remington before they made their show. The reviews are pretty positive when it came out. One in particular was like a modern man, a modern woman, and a marvelous entertainment, which I think for some reason really made me laugh. But let's sort of, what's interesting is sort of there was a saga cell on this, right? It was she wants to be a detective. She wants to, have her own business. And she opens up that business and basically can't get hired. So she makes up a fake Remington Steele. She makes up a guy, her boss, and then starts getting jobs. And then a guy steps in and starts playing that role, and he shows up in the middle of a case, and they decide to start working together. Very funny concept for a show, right?
Very
funny concept for a show. And yet, we're going to find out in the research I've done that it took a long time to sell that show.
A surprisingly long time.
Yeah. So the thing that is timeless about this show that makes it successful then, and I think makes it hold up now, are the stars of the show. Stephanie Zimbalist and Pierce Brosnan are spectacularly well cast. They are fantastic together. They are fun to watch. And they have that same kind of special tone that fits the show, where they are both sophisticated and funny and confident.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's the power of the performance. It's the chemistry between all of the actors on the show that really make it all sing. I mean, it's the last piece of the puzzle of all the things that come together to make this or any show successful or anything good. But without those two performers, those two performances, there is no Remington Steele.
And it's so interesting. I mean, Michael Gleason, co-creator of the show, talks about that. One of the comments he made about Pierce in the pilot and the early episodes was he's so skilled at having a good time with his character. And I thought that was such a great way to talk about an actor really embracing what they're doing. And that's the confidence of it, is having a good time with the character that you're playing. And their ease of being comfortable together, like, again, off the bat, seems pretty spectacular. And again, I think is one of the things we love about television is how quickly you can create those relationships. And when they work, you're like, in. The audience is in. All right. See you in 5 seasons.
Plus, this is a show that touched on sometimes one genre a little bit more harder than the other in an episode or across episodes. But the performers had to be able to do comedy. They had to be able to do drama. They had to do action. They did so much running in this show. It was astonishing. And to be able to do all of it well. And again, all of it in every episode. And that's so remarkable. It's so remarkable what they were able to bring to this show.
And that's what holds up.
Mm-hmm.
In talking about Stephanie Zimbalist, they were saying that she really got the show, right? She very early on was like, oh, this is a show that has 3 feet off the ground. So the only way to play it is with both feet on the ground. And so they both take it very seriously, even though there's so much humor in the piece. And gets to be more. Like, I think they loosen up a little bit in later episodes than from the early episodes, as of course you would do once you kind of find the direction of the show, and people really engaged with the humor of the show for sure.
And I'm sure the writers began to put more and more things into the writing as they saw they had performers that could handle it. That I'm sure made a big difference too. So I give them all credit.
For sure. And we're going to also do a little bit of dive into some of our favorite episodes real quick from like an early thing. We'll dive into more later, but I want to kind of just off the top kind of talk about like your favorite episodes, my favorite episodes so far.
Well, I think you have to start with the pilot. They got it so right, as we've just been discussing on so many levels. And without a pilot that good to set up everything that comes after it, sometimes it's hard to come back from that. But the pilot for this show, I mean, you could have practically, except for the element of Remington Steele embodied by this mystery man, this episode could fit just about anywhere in the series. It's really well written. It's really a tight mystery. It's got all kinds of good, fun stuff going on, and it's really terrific.
Yeah, it starts off with both a good case and this like fabulous introduction for both her as a character, and then this complete turn that is now going to change her life and her detective agency and the course of what comes next. So it's one of those really pieces that does work well. So it starts off and she's got a case, and the case is to be the security for these very special diamonds that are from South Africa and travel the world being special diamonds, and a car creator, a special car manufacturer is revealing his first amazing car and needs the diamonds as being the unique, sort of press to go with his unique car. And so they're having to protect the diamonds. And it turns out that Pierce Brosnan's character is after the diamonds because he is a con man and a thief. And so when he shows up to try to get the diamonds, he basically shows up in the guise of an inspector from South Africa who is tracking down the diamonds and trying to protect them, and then takes on. So he first comes in and introduces himself as Ben Pearson, an inspector from South Africa, and they're clearly attracted to each other at that point. And then later, he pretends to be Remington Steele in order to get out of a sticky situation. And then later she finds out that he's pretending to be Remington Steele. And it turns out nobody could be Remington Steele because Remington Steele doesn't exist. And she's been using him as this facade. So it is sort of liars talking to liars in some ways. And they're both sort of conning each other, which I think gives equal weight to both of them. And so it's very exciting to watch all those sort of revelations play out. But like you said, the case itself is very interesting, and apparently based on DeLorean.
I hadn't thought of that, but that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, that's what they said. They wrote it. They based it on DeLorean, who made the DeLorean, and was very famously sort of this renegade in the car world. And then they said about a year later he was arrested for all of his, backdoor dealing. So they probably couldn't have written that pilot a year later, which is very interesting. But the pilot it really is, if you're looking for kind of really great, solid pilots, it's pretty much one of them. It has got a lot of pieces that do work for it. It's got a very interesting cast. It's beautifully directed, I think, for the time. So the co-creator of this show, this is the interesting thing. So we haven't talked about how this show,
right.
This show was created by Robert Butler and Michael Gleason. It was originally conceived of by Robert Butler. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in my Deep Dark Secrets.
Ooh.
But ultimately, Robert Butler was a huge director. He directed the pilots of many brilliant TV shows, including Star Trek and Remington Steele, and later went on to direct the pilot of Moonlighting. So, but he was the co-creator of the show, and paired with Michael Gleason, also another very accomplished television creator, writer, and producer. And again, together they seem to really create quite a spectacular and unique for the time show. My other favorite, some of my other favorite episodes was they bring in Stephanie Zimbalist's dad, Efren Zimbalist Jr., who was a star, a huge star as well. And so he becomes a recurring character, Daniel Chalmers, who's this con man who was sort of also the mentor for Pierce Brosnan's character, who, by the way, has no name. He does not know his real name. He presents with 5 passports with 5 different names, all after Humphrey Bogart characters. So this guy is a real mystery when he shows up, and a real con man, and very slick, and very charming. And so there's lots of reasons for her not to trust him.
Right.
But he helps her out in a pinch. And so she's like, okay, we'll come be this guy. You do buy that conceit a little bit. It has to be a TV show. So I guess we have to do that.
Well, you do. I mean, you do buy that because in some ways he didn't give her much choice. But at the same time, I think she also saw where if she could control him, it could be to her advantage. She could control what he did and where, how he presented himself. It would be to her advantage.
For sure, because she wants her detective agency to be successful. And so I think she's chasing the success of being the top detective agency, and has kind of run the invisible guy as far as she can run. And so having an actual person is going to mean that, I think, to her, that she'll get more jobs and bigger jobs and more high profile jobs. And that's clearly what she's also chasing. she's ambitious, and he fits that ambition at the right time. And so that's why she says yes. So they do make sense of it. And so I think it does sort of, they both need each other a little bit. It's a little unclear why he doesn't just move on, but it has to do with her. He is entranced by her. And he's entranced by the opportunity to, I think, step into the role of a better person.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I've always taken away from the show is he was never what could be considered for lack of a better word, a bad guy, a villain. He was someone who had been doing things to get by and found he had a good facility for going around the world and doing these sorts of things. And he lands in this situation where he gets to pretend to use all of his skills in this role of this super detective and begins to find that it really kind of suits him.
It's kind of ultimate con. It's the ultimate con. Like it's a con that he can slip into very easily because he has all those skills. But also, I think he just likes it. He's clearly, even though he's this like big thief and con man and can throw a punch, he also seems to sort of have the heart of the artist. And I think the love of sort of this 1930s comedy. They really are. They are making direct references in the pilot to The Thin Man and the Thin Man movies. And that's a husband and wife team that are basically detectives and chasing down crime, but also like wearing their tuxedos and drinking a lot and being quippy and funny. Again, very heart-to-heart-ish. This is more down to earth. They're a little scrappier, but the comedy and the nod to the 30s is so clear in this pilot and so fun, again, for movie lovers. In the first 2 episodes, they make 4 actual literal references to movies, and that continues through the series. It's one of the really fun things about the production that also was fairly unique for the time is to recognize, like, so here's some notable production issues that I noticed. They use, obviously, the word Steele, Steele, in the episode title names for every episode. That wasn't particularly definitely unique at the time, but it was somewhat special. And I remember that, again, from older childhood, and they make movie references in almost every episode. So, as I said, the very first movie reference in this show is to Casablanca. And so that tells you what kind of show it's nodding to, right?
Yeah.
Then Thin Man, there's a direct reference North by Northwest and to Tea and Sympathy. That's just in the first 2 episodes where they're literally quoting lines, showing like images on television from the Thin Man, or literally setting up a scene that is the exact same scene and commenting on it. He says, "Oh, I'm going to set up this dinner party, and then I'll accuse the bad guy of it in the middle of the dinner party to catch him," which is a direct reference to the Thin Man. And he's quoting characters. So he's a character who is sort of in love with movies and using those as a way to be a detective.
Yeah, because I would imagine on some level, obviously he grew up watching all those movies, being a fan of all those movies and thinking, wow, isn't that great? What a great way to live. I'd like to be, one of the characters in these movies. And that's kind of what Remington Steele became for him. And as a classic movie fan, I always loved that. It made me so happy when they would mention, whatever movie that was woven into the plot for that week's episode. I just thought that was so great. I don't know off the top of my head if any other show has been able to do that as successfully as they have, or done it as overtly as they obviously did on this show. And I just loved it. There's another aspect of the show that I thought really elevated it.
And it was one that is definitely from Michael Gleason. He talks about it, and it was because he was a big film nerd. Basically, it sounded like the studio didn't love it, or the network didn't love it, but the fans did. And if they didn't do a reference in an episode, they heard from fans about it.
Oh, I'm sure.
And it is one of the things that I think a lot of fans love, and it's one of those things that makes you want to watch those movies. They mentioned Tea and Sympathy. I've never seen it. And I was like, I want to go watch that now. I've seen the others, but that are referenced there, but they're throughout the series. And so you feel like, I have some homework to do after watching this because I want to go find that reference. But I also think it was an interesting thing. It was starting to be the consciousness of people recognizing that they were, in real life, using movies and television to learn, to sort of decide how to behave. There was a cousin-in-law of mine who was a Vietnam vet, and I was talking to him. He was a sniper, a very successful sniper, and I was talking to him about what he would. He went at 18 to Vietnam, and I was like, "How did you do that?" And was jumping out of planes and being this like sniper where he was killing people. And he's like, I would just imagine myself in a movie.
Wow.
And I thought that was I'm like, I think that everybody kind of does that. That's how you get through things. You're like, well, here's how I'm going to do something that I don't know how to do. It was just, it stayed with me. And so there's something weirdly serious about that, but it's one of those reasons I think we do love all these stories, and movies and television are so profound in our pop culture. Is it's how are we going to behave? How are we going to be? And so it was vital at the time to. I don't know. I've gotten off on a whole other tangent that what we were going to talk about is very serious. Oh, Susan. Oh, my God. The Santa Anas are coming. Anyway, but back to the show. I love the movie references. The fans love the movie references, clearly. It gave a lot of color and flavor to that character that was extra charming. And then she starts doing it. It's one of the things that she learns from him is, this movie, she's willing to take something from him. And that's his way to approach the detective agency. And then she's like, well, here's how we do it in real life. And so I do love that he's fairly incompetent at being a detective. And she's obviously very good at it. It's just a little bit of the reverse of Scarecrow Mrs. King. I will say that both Pierce Brosnan and Stephanie Zimbalist as actors did do a lot of their own stunts. And it is a pretty stunning show. Less car chases and more fist fights and racing after chasing people down. And in particular, Stephanie Zimbalist is pretty amazing. One of the best runners in high heels that I've seen. You're like, wait, she's really doing that. There are times you can really see her running in the high heels, and they make a reference to it, I think, in one of your favorite episodes, and mine, but really yours. Well,
and I don't know that I've ever seen an actress in a TV show or a movie, for that matter, that did not just so much running, but climbing over walls and jumping off of things and into things and over things. And it's really amazing.
Hanging on to cars. You're like, again, I'm a little worried about the actors from the 80s. I don't think they should have been doing all of this. I don't think they could do them now. I think insurance companies would be like, no, you're not taking the star of the show and having them be dragged by a car. It's pretty insane. They are doing a lot of their own stunts. Apparently, Pierce Brosnan contracted Bell's palsy after an episode in which he was did a fist fight in the LA River, and the LA River notoriously, which is basically a big cement trough for those that don't know the LA River, with a little bit of water running in it, very shallow water, but also usually pretty toxic water. So they had to kind of stop production because their lead actor got ill because of a stunt that he did.
See, and you think that, being an actor's pretty simple, pretty easy. No, not on this show. You're running, you're jumping, you're, getting injured and all kinds of stuff on this show. You just never know.
I blame James Gardner. He famously did a lot of his stunts for Rockford Files, and later talked about how much he paid for it with his back and other problems. And I think they were young, and they were both clearly very capable. Stephanie Zimbalist, just really had, is this like crazy quadruple threat, like actress, dancer, singer, writer, and just is clearly capable of doing it all, both as an actress, but also then that character, it sort of transforms to that character where she's like, I can do everything I want to do it. And obviously that was just really impactful. There were a lot of male characters like that. Mm-hmm. There were not a lot of female characters like that on television. Even with Heart to Heart, it's them as a team, mm-hmm. right? It's her as a wife doing it. Even Scarecrow Mrs. King, it's her. She's not going, I'm going to go be a spy on my own. This is a woman that is, I am a detective and I'm going to be it on my own if that's what I have to do to get the jobs I want and the credit I want.
Yeah. And she'd built this agency. I think probably had taken it as far as she could have without a presence of Remington Steele, because I would imagine more and more of her clients, as in the pilot episode, were like, what do you mean I can't meet him? Where is he? What's he doing?
They use the excuse like, well, Mr. Steele likes to act in the consulting capacity in most of these cases. And you're like, why isn't he supposed to be? But she's pulled it off. They've pulled it off. And she has two sidekicks that have been helping her pull it off. Her secretary, and I'm blanking on the name, but we're going to look it up right now while I'm talking. And then her detective assistant, plays by James Beard. And he's like the other inspector, that they sort of came up together. We learn in later episodes that they were sort of trained together and worked at the same agencies together. And then she went off and started this agency, and he works for her, mm-hmm. which again is a throwback to the Honey West, a TV show where she was the detective and had a male assistant. And he clearly is second to her. And so they're in on it. And I think that is, so they only last one season though.
Right.
And I think that's one of the reasons, is because they're in on the charade, as Remington Steele would say in the first season.
Well, I never like to see, actors lose a gig because they're hard to come by. But the producers brilliantly cast Doris Roberts as Mildred Krebs come season 2. And she just brought so much to that role and to the show in a way that the other two actors maybe just weren't allowed to, or maybe their characters didn't allow for. It was brilliant. The three of them together were just such a great team.
Well, we're going to get into season. I mean, you're jumping ahead to season 2.
I can't help myself.
I just want to stay on James Reed for a minute. He played Michael Murphy.
Murphy Michael?
Murphy Michaels. Mm-hmm. Sorry, Murphy Michaels, not Michael Murphy.
Two first names. What are you going to do?
James Reed, very strong actor at the time, very, in a lot of stuff, and basically could have run his own show at the time, or could have been on his own show, but by the end of the first season, it's clear that it's become the, Remington and Laura show and the Pierce and Stephanie show. And so he actually goes to the showrunners at the end of season 1 and is like, I don't have anything to do. You really need to let me go. And so that makes them rethink. So they decide to let go of both Bernice and Murphy and replace those two characters with one character. And that sort of combine them into one secretary / second investigator. And we're going to talk about that in Deep Dark Secrets.
Excellent.
All right. We're going to take a little break.
Sounds like a plan.
And we're back.
Why don't we just dive into it?
Let's do Deep Dark Secrets right now. Nobody's stopping us. We can do it.
Yeah, and so continuing on with that, they originally were planning to bring in an actress to be the receptionist, secretary, assistant, whatever you want to call it, that might potentially be a rival for Remington's affections. And Doris Roberts came in and auditioned, and they went, we think we're going to go another way with this. Because she's just too good.
It completely changed the direction of that character, and I think the show and made it stronger. I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
And I'm also very excited to say it made it more female-driven.
Yeah.
First season of the show, there are 2 leads and 2 sort of, second leads. And it's 50-50, which again, pretty good for a TV show in the 80s, 50-50 male-female ratio. But when we get to season 2, it's Stephanie, Pierce Brosnan, and Doris Roberts. So it makes it 60% female lead cast, 66%. And I'm pretty excited about that because that does not happen very often.
No.
And I think it does really change the show in a great way, because now you have 2 female characters who have something to do, who are working together, who, again, I'm not sure that it ever really passes the Bechdel test much at all. They have the very basic, 2 women having a conversation that's not about a man, because most of the time when it's the 2 women having a conversation, it's mostly about Remington Steele.
Sometimes it's about the case, though, whether it be Mildred giving Laura information that she's gleaned, or Laura giving Doris an assignment to go take care of something or do something to solve the case.
I stand corrected. You're right.
It's okay.
No.
But having said that, on the other side of that, though, you do have Mildred coming in and thinking, of course, that Remington Steele is Remington Steele, deferring to him, despite the fact that Laura keeps saying to her, you need to talk to me about that, or I can handle that, or you don't need to remember because Mildred doesn't know.
Mildred thinks he is Remington Steele, and that Remington Steele is the head of the agency.
Exactly.
She does not know in season 2 that in fact it is Laura that is the boss. Mm-hmm. They keep sort of saying, "Oh, you should include her," and then ultimately in further seasons, she does become to know that secret and becomes part of the full team. And I think giving that evolution to a character is a great way to go. And I also think that there's something really wonderful about Doris Roberts. They give her a little bit of romantic moments. Mm-hmm. They give her a lot to do. She's very funny. Oh my God. Yeah. She's really funny and also warm, and also kind of holds her own with them. I think in later seasons, they start to not use her as much as they should, and it becomes challenging because it's not as much fun. It's really wonderful when the 3 of them are going, and the introduction of her character at the beginning of season 2 is really great. It is both really great and clearly it's a 2-parter, and it's clearly and they go on location in Mexico, and it is clearly also a little bit of an audition for James Bond.
And one of the things I love about it's a small thing, but Mildred kind of has her own, I don't want to call it a theme song, but a musical cue that basically denotes the Mildred of it all.
Yes.
And every now and then, after the first couple episodes when she's introduced, we get to hear it occasionally when she's about to go back into that mode as part of a case or something. And I just love that so much.
Yes, I love that she gets her own theme song. I don't think it's written by Henry Mancini, but the music continues to be good. He does not continue to do all the music for the show, right, but the music continues to be pretty strong. And they do have those lovely moments of characters. Doris Roberts, of course, was again a well-known actress at the time. This basically made her into a star even bigger than she was. She went on to win 3 Emmys for playing the mother-in-law Marie Barone on Everybody Loves Raymond, and continued to be a big star.
And she was nominated once for Remington Steele as well. I believe hers is the only Emmy nomination, sadly, for the show.
That's crazy. That seems crazy to me.
There's so many things wrong with that as far as I'm concerned.
Like, I think the cinematography, that pilot is beautiful. Mm-hmm. It's beautiful. It's very dark, which is like in tone. It's like, it's got a very kind of low key palette. It's got a very noir. There's a lot of nods to noir as well. All right. But so that's our first deep dark secret, is that they were not looking for Doris Roberts for the character in season 2 for Mildred Krebs. Mm-hmm. Deep Dark Secret number 2, and we almost gave this one away. It was first conceived, this idea was first conceived in 1969 by the TV director Robert Butler. He pitched it at the time to Grant Tinker, who was not like super running NBC Grant Tinker, but was the beginning of, and even pre Mary Tyler Moore Grant Tinker, or MTM Productions Grant Tinker. And he was like, I think it's too early.
Grant Tinker was the one that said, yeah, it's too soon for this.
That's, again, I'm reading through a lot of old articles, and that's my
story.
And that's my story. I'm going to stick to it for now until we hear otherwise. Number 2, it was originally pitched without the actual Remington Steele showing up. It was pitched as a female private eye who makes up a man so she can do her job. It was only when they went back to pitch it to Grant Tinker again, and then later. To NBC years later in the late 70s, early 80s, that basically they said, well, go work with Michael Gleason on developing it a little bit more and figuring out what it really is. And Michael Gleason came up with the idea that wouldn't it be great if he showed up, the fake man, and made her crazy. Mm-hmm. They came up with that. They're like, oh, this is it. This is amazing because, again, you got a lot of twists and turns in that. You're like, oh, that sounds like a TV show. NBC passed. So they went and pitched it. NBC passed. They're like, oops, okay. But then very shortly, Grant Tinker became head of NBC. And then he's like, yeah, no, I think we're going to say yes now.
It helps to be the boss.
Deep Dark Secret number 3. The original pilot that was ordered by NBC actually ended up being episode 2 of the series. NBC wanted to make sure that what they had was more than just a concept. They wanted the creators to imagine a pilot where the characters were already working together 6 months in so that they could go, oh yeah, this can be a case by case. But then once they picked up the show, they realized it was a little bit confusing and they wanted a premise pilot to show how they met because they knew that people, audiences, I think their test audiences were like, I don't know what's happening.
Smart. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I think this is the kind of show that dropping the audience in the middle of it would, as you said, been too confusing and people would not have been quite sure what the heck they were watching. So,
and I think they were trying to make sure that it did work as a case by case show, which was what they wanted, right? They just wanted case by case. They wanted people to tune in every word. And that's what was working. That was Simon and Simon. That was Magnum PI.
Right.
That was Heart to Heart. It's like you didn't have to really know that those characters were going to evolve. Magnum PI didn't evolve as a character. Simon and Simon didn't evolve as characters in their relationship to each other. They had drama and they had stories and things that happened to them, but their relationship didn't change and their relationship to themselves didn't change. Same with, Angela Lansbury, like Murder, She Wrote. She's always whoever that character that Angela Lansbury played that basically feels like Angela Lansbury. And so I think, again, television was a little bit worried about we're going to have people change over the course of a show. And, and basically what television is now, which is, ever evolving. And if you miss an episode, a character may not be there when you get back.
Right.
So the original pilot became episode 2. They made a new pilot. They kind of tweaked some of episode 2 to make it work so that it was there. My other deep dark secret is that Stephanie Zimbalist was the star of the show. It wasn't Pierce Brosnan. She was number 1 on the call sheet. She's first credited. She turned it down twice, apparently, because Stephanie Zimbalist was a star. She was a television star. Mm-hmm. She was a TV movie star. She came from an entertainment dynasty. Her grandfather was Ephraim Zimbalist Sr., a renowned violinist, married to a renowned opera singer, Alma Gluck. And then, of course, Ephraim Zimbalist Jr., renowned star, big star. I knew Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. name. Mm-hmm. I didn't know Ephraim Zimbalist Sr. as a kid. So I watched the show for her. I watched the show because I was like, oh, Stephanie Zimbalist, I think she had just been on, I remember her from Centennial. She starred in the big TV miniseries Centennial, which was some giant, that's all they did in the 70s was giant.
They did a lot of giant miniseries, yes.
Historical miniseries.
Most of them were really great, but that's another story for another pilot for another day, I suppose.
And Pierce Brosnan had done also a miniseries. That's what made him kind of a known actor entity. It was called Mansions of Ireland. No, it's called Mansions of something.
The Manions of America?
Manions of America. Thank you. I read it and I think mansions. But it's the Manions. It was about an Irish family immigrating to America, and he was basically the star of that.
Despite the fact that I saw a lot of 70s and maybe early 80s miniseries, I don't think I ever saw that one. But something to add to my to-do list. But, I'm glad you mentioned that, because if you look at the cover art on the DVDs or whatever little shot you see on whatever streaming service perhaps you're watching this on, you would think that he was number one on the call sheet. Of course, the show is named after his character, so it's hard not to think about that. And he did go on and play James Bond, but it was not him, it was her. And she was always the first actor listed in the credits throughout the entire show as well, I believe. So
there was a bit of a big kerfuffle when the DVD Season 1 was first released in 2005 because only he was on the front of the DVD cover. Only his name was on the front of the DVD cover. And they had to later go back and put a sticker. They had to add a sticker. Also starring Stefan Zimbalist, which again is the show, right? Like, it's the show. You've got to be kidding me. The second became the first. And the woman was forgotten. Yeah. So he takes all the bows, for sure.
Which so mirrors the show.
It so mirrors the show.
Life imitating art to a large extent.
It's so crazy. She wasn't interviewed for the Season 1 DVDs. They did go back and correct it because people were pretty outraged, as they should be. 2005. Come on, people. I will say there are great interviews and great commentaries on the DVD. The DVDs, the DVD releases are pretty great, but it's really the interviews and the commentaries and the special features, which is one of the things I think we miss on the streaming.
I do too. On some streamers you can get commentary, but I don't know how prevalent that is. I mean, since I've been rewatching the shows on DVDs, I've been able to watch some of the extras and commentary, but I don't know how I don't know how prevalent that is when it comes to streaming on most TV shows in particular. Maybe movies, it's different. I'm not sure. So
it was so helpful. I mean, one of the things is you can find stuff now if you go looking for it, but it was so amazing in the time of DVDs and when I was in grad school, film school, and the laser discs, the Criterion collection of movies, all the special features. You were able to have a little film school in those. Incredibly valuable information and information that I'm afraid will go away.
Yeah.
Right? If it's not in streaming. What is interesting is, the show is now streaming on Amazon. I was kind of struck by the description of the show on Amazon. Shall I read it to you? Private investigator Laura Holt has a problem. No one appears interested in hiring a female private eye. Her solution? She invents a boss named Remington Steele, changes her agency name to Remington Steele Detective Agency, and suddenly she has more cases than she can handle. And that's it. They're selling her. They're selling a female-driven show.
Fascinating.
Which I thought was pretty fascinating.
Wow.
Because Amazon is all about algorithms and what will sell and make people watch based on what they're looking at. And I think right now, a female-driven show, they decided that was the best way to do. They may be thinking, well, people already know that Pierce Brosnan was also on that show. And there's certainly an image of the two of them on the show, but I thought it was very fascinating given that they're selling the show as basically a female-driven show. They're not even mentioning that this guy shows up and starts to be Remington Steele.
That's really fascinating. That's fascinating. Huh.
Okay, that wasn't even one of my deep, dark secrets.
Yeah, but it's an important thing to know, I think, in that the search algorithms for streaming sites of any kind do use, if you're searching for female detective, well, it sounds like it's going to show you Remington Steele.
Yeah.
As opposed to not showing you Remington Steele because that's not how they categorize it within Amazon. And it shows you the power of that. That categorization. Oh, that's so interesting.
And maybe what people are looking for now, as opposed to 1980. One of my other little interesting tidbits, not really a secret, is the actual big rating success. I thought this was a success from early on, and it was a successful show, but its big ratings came in season 3. So in season 2, it was actually considered a success. They gave it a bigger budget going to season 2, also a little bit unusual, and moved it from Friday night to Tuesday night after the A-Team, one of their most successful shows.
Nice.
They got more money, more eyeballs, and they were starting to climb in the ratings. But season 3 was the biggest ratings of the show, which of course meant that, here's my other thing, this is a show that was canceled and then reverse canceled. After season 4, they canceled the show. It was like a top 20 show, and they canceled it because they just didn't have room in their schedules. NBC had become apparently very successful in those interim years, and suddenly apparently didn't have room in the schedule for this show. I don't know if that's the true story. Maybe we'll get that throughout the next podcast episodes. But then Pierce Brosnan was offered James Bond, or they was in the talks to do the next James Bond, to do Living Daylights.
And I read also over that summer, the ratings went up.
Because of reruns.
Because of reruns, and because of the news that the star of Remington Steele was now being considered to play James Bond. So people went, oh, I should go check out this show, and watch the reruns over the summer. So NBC went, huh. And so next thing you know, Remington Steele is coming back.
NBC Warren Littlefields reversed the cancellation and decides to call them back for a final season. Season 5 turns out to be only 6 made-for-TV films. Apparently everybody was miserable. Pierce Brosnan did a famous People magazine cover story.
Yes, I believe the title of the article on People magazine with him on the cover is "Take This Job and Shove It."
And he's looking unhappy. It may be one of the only People magazine covers where you have a giant star frowning. He's frowning.
It's hard to imagine something like that making it on the cover of a magazine today, but it's really kind of astounding. The subtitle or the subtext is "Trapped on Remington Steele, Pierce Brosnan sounds off on his battle to be the new James Bond." Wow.
I mean, that's pretty huge. I honestly don't remember that. I was in film school at the time, so there was a lot I was missing. But Stephanie Zimbalist also was unable to do a film that she had been cast in. She had been cast to play Officer Ann Lewis in RoboCop, and she had to turn it down to go back for season 5. And in a later interview, she was like, well, I didn't complain. I wasn't bitter. Which does bring us a little bit to, there was rumor of the troubles on set. And again, I think when you have these shows, there's always rumors of the troubles on set. You have 2 young actors. They're in their early to mid-20s. They're doing this show. They both become stars, but one of them becomes kind of a superstar. Mm-hmm. And it's the second on the call sheet that becomes kind of like a superstar. So I think it is sort of famous that there was rumor that there was trouble between the 2 stars on set. In a 1983 interview with Stephanie Zimbalist, when they were already shooting season 2, here's what she said. She was troubled by how they were writing her character. She's in season 1. She said, in some episodes, there's been a tendency to lapse into a traditional TV stereotype with the man calling the shots and the woman doing a lot of screaming. The only thing I'm troubled by is when they go away from the show's premise. I'm troubled when they forget that she's in charge. When they change the relationship, they change my character. That is why I took the show. A strong Laura Holt. So I think it's interesting that she knew she was in a female-driven TV show. And I think it's interesting that that attitude, which seems like a pretty reasonable attitude for the star of a show, is also the same attitude that caused trouble in some ways, potentially, for Kate Jackson on Scarecrow Mrs. King. And by trouble, I'm doing that in quotes because I don't know how much trouble there was. They have since, in later interviews, they actually speak very fondly of each other, and yet also acknowledge that they were both young and that they were both struggling with, I think, what that success of the show meant for them. And the challenges, I think it's very challenging to be the lead actor on a show that has become very successful. I think it comes with a lot of pressure. And there's a lot of people going, well, you have to, make sure that you're in charge.
Yeah. I mean, and at the end of the day, they're all human. They're human beings, and they've got all kinds of things coming at them in all different ways. And, it's even under the best of circumstances, people aren't always at their best for reasons that have nothing to do with whatever relationship, working or otherwise, you have with. We're all people, basically. We're all flawed people who have lives in and outside of whatever our work is that can sometimes infiltrate. I'm not saying it did, but everybody brings things to work that don't necessarily belong there.
And when you have to be that intimate with somebody else, and you have to play in this way where you are intimate and you are being sort of vulnerable, I think it's very challenging.
And they work long hours. They're on set 14, 16 hours a day.
Doing their own stunts.
Yeah, exactly. Doing their own running, doing their own jumping, and trying to remember what they're supposed to say at what time. I mean, it's not, it may look easy, but it's not. It's not for any of them.
And I think Stephanie Zimbalist had a lot of say in her character. I mean, I think they both did, but I think particularly, so this is one of my other little tidbits. Laura Holt's famous fedora, which again is a pretty iconic from the 80s female-driven character image. It was Stephanie Zimbalist's idea. And according to Michael Gleason, she wanted to use it as a nod to the Thin Man and to 1930s comedies. She totally that's what the show was trying to do. It's one of the things that she loved about it was sort of the mystery and the comedy. I think, the writing was pretty strong, so she really liked that. But she really kind of picked that fedora for herself. The director, Robert Butler, loved it and he was like, I ended up using a lot of fedoras in that pilot. And you can see it in the pilot. He put the fedoras on the bad guys that are kind of chasing Pierce Brosnan, and then had to reshoot some of those scenes so that because he's like, there was too many hats. And so you can see in one scene where the bad guys are sort of right next to Pierce Brosnan and flanking him and talking to him. They do not have fedoras on. And then the scene immediately previous to and immediately following that scene, they do. So they had reshot that scene in order to not have too many hats literally on screen. And
she looked great in a fedora. Not all of us do. I have to admit, I'm not a hat person. My head and my hat doesn't like hats, so I admire people who can wear a hat well.
I always wanted to wear a cowboy hat, and I can't pull it off. I could pull off a baseball cap for a while, and so I still sometimes wear a baseball cap. But I would love to. I have a fedora. I have it's still in my closet. It was my grandfather's fedora.
Oh wow!
But I can't wear it because I look like an idiot.
Yeah, it does take a certain something to be able to pull it off, and she certainly could. So
she certainly could. Yeah. And they're a little nod to the costumes. Mm-hmm. Holy crap, they both look pretty great. Yep. In season 1 and throughout, it gets a little like, there's definitely some 80s moments. There's just like a brown leather jacket that you're like, I don't know about that. But his suits are pretty spectacular.
Yeah.
And my directing and acting teacher, Nina Foch, who taught at USC, talked about how well Pierce Brosnan worked a suit. Mm. He's one of the best actors for working suits and props. And I went back and looked at those episodes at the time and watched that show to watch him work his suit. He's always sort of pulling at the cuffs, or, he's always busy. Mm-hmm. He's very inventive as an actor in the Remington Steele. If you're an actor or an actress and you want to watch somebody kind of figuring out how and when to be busy, that's a good character. That's a good actor to watch.
And he's not distracting with it. I mean, it's not pulling your eye. It's just, it's really kind of amazing.
It's pretty amazing. Yeah. She's so amazing in that, again, she looks great in everything.
Yeah.
She's pretty, they put her in some glamorous stuff, and it's pretty It's pretty amazing. And stuff you're like, wow, that necklace is something. But she pulls it off and is also just very confident and taking charge of so many scenes in those early episodes. It's really spectacular to watch even now.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to get to our last little factoid. Pierce Brosnan had never done comedy before. About midway through the first season, he apparently went to Michael Gleason and was like, how am I doing? I've never done comedy before. And Michael Gleason was like, great, don't change a thing.
I find that just so astonishing. He's so funny in the show, the things he does. And you can hear on at least one of the commentaries where they're talking about a little bit of business that he came up with. And he was constantly coming up with little things to do to make the scene. I mean, he's just such a natural comedian. And I know that he was in Mrs. Doubtfire, but he was such a
straight man kind of.
Supporting character. I really wish he had a chance to do something just real flat out comedy at some point. And if he has, I would love to. Maybe I should go back and look through his IMDb page because maybe I missed it because I'm drawing a blank.
Now I want to go. Well, we're going to have to go back and see. I will say again, I think the comedy, the physical comedy, gets a little dialed up in season 2, 3, and 4, and he does get to do. He gets quite wacky. So there's one of the episodes that I like, and I think it's in season 4, and we'll go into this deeper later. Is Louis Anderson is in, and he and Louis Anderson are basically doing, a comedy duo team, detective team on their own. I think he's forgotten that he works with Laura Holt because they're basically doing Abbott and Costello or something. Like there's a lot of like, wait, they're having too good a time. Anyway, so those are all my little secrets. Most of them aren't secrets. They can be found everywhere. I thought it was one of my other little fun things is that there's a special vanity card at the end for MTM. MTM Enterprises was created by Mary Tyler Moore and her then husband Grant Tinker to produce the Mary Tyler Moore Show. Not unlike Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz, creating Desilu Productions to do I Love Lucy. Both Desilu and MTM Enterprises go on to be the production company for kind of amazing amount of successful shows. Sidebar, Lucille Ball ultimately bought out Desi Arnaz from Desilu and ran the company on her own. She was the first woman to run a major studio. Again, something that she doesn't get a lot of credit for. Desilu produced 20 to 30 shows, including The Untouchables, Mannix, Mission Impossible, and Star Trek. A little show called Star Trek, in addition to I Love Lucy. But MTM Enterprises, created by Mary Tyler Moore and Grant Tinker, went on to produce Rhoda, Bob Newhart, The Newhart Show, Tony Randall Show, Lou Grant, White Shadow, WKRP in Cincinnati, Hill Street Blues, and St. Elsewhere, which we were talking about earlier, having just a spectacular cast. Anyway, I thought it was really interesting because the little vanity card at the end, they often changed for their shows. Their vanity card was basically a spoof of the MGM Leo the Lion logo. And this was a little Mimsy, the orange tabby kitten, who is placed inside the MTM logo and adorably meowing instead of the lion roar. For Remington Steele, the logo had, the little Mimsy had a Sherlock Holmes cap and a pipe, and it drops out of the little cat's mouth when it meows.
So
and
cute.
It's pretty cute and very funny. It's a nice little button. I was recognizing how cute that was. So that was my little shout out to Mimsy. All right. We're going to take a little break and then we're going to come back and find out, but is it feminist? I think it's just, but is it? And then we'll find out if it's feminist or more.
Sounds like a plan.
And we're back. All right. We're ready to do, but is it? Remington Steele, but is it feminist?
Yes, it is.
Sharon says yes. And why?
The first show we covered was Scarecrow and Mrs. King, about a woman who had spent a number of years raising her family and got divorced and inadvertently found herself becoming a spy. This show is about a woman who decided she had a profession she wanted to follow, did all the work, and found that she wasn't able to be as successful as she would like without somebody thinking that there was a man who basically was in charge. But she did not let that stop her and made up Remington Steele, which allowed her agency to move forward. So as someone who believes that being a feminist basically is following your own path, whatever that may be in your professional or your personal life, this was her choice. She made it happen. So I think, yeah, it is definitely feminist.
All right.
And what do you think?
Well, I think it's both feminist and not feminist. Again, not unlike, no. And Melissa's going to, all right, Melissa, come on in, because we know what we've been talking about. No, you got to get in here. Melissa Roth, get in here. Jump on in. I'll wrap it up later. Go.
Blow back to the 70s. That's all I could say is that, it's like, okay, we'll give her some time, but she can't really be on her own. It's got to be with the man,
Yeah. So for you, it is a no.
I love them. I mean, I was a big fan. I've been enjoying watching the reruns. They're adorable. Capital A, adorable. They work really well together, like you said. But I just don't see it as a feminist icon to hold up.
There you go. All right. But here's what I'm going to say. She is a feminist.
Yes.
She is a feminist.
Yes. You didn't ask me that.
Yes. No, I know. But here's the thing. If there is a strong feminist character in a show who is a lead of the show could still be not feminist, but it still has an element of feminism.
Agreed.
However, this is big controversy, actually, and became so even before our podcast.
Ooh, interesting. It seems so cut and dry to me.
It seems, and that's what I'm saying, because I think it does. The original concept of the show, I am going to say, is feminist. But the more interesting show that became of basically bringing in a man to become the fake man, the challenges in it, and it really shows up in season 1. It gets better in season 2. Stephanie Zimbalist, I totally believe, is right. They changed the show. The concept, they're still thinking is a feminist show, but as soon as Pierce Brosnan shows up, and maybe because it's Pierce Brosnan, but mostly because it's the man now actually being a real man in a position of power, even if he doesn't deserve it, even if he doesn't earn it, it's literally about she does all the work and he takes the bows.
Granted, yeah.
It's literally written into the saga cell of the show, which is I do all the work and he takes the bows. And that is one of the challenges of feminism, is just being able to do all the work doesn't mean that it's feminism.
Well, I mean, there are a lot of ways to define feminism.
Yes.
I find that the show is built more into the patriarchy than a feminist breakdown, that it lines up with gender roles that we're all familiar with.
Yes.
No question. But I think for me as a young woman, when this show came out and seeing this woman on the show basically saying, I don't care that if these are the parameters in which I need to work in order to do what I want, because I'm really good at it and I really like it. Okay. And then this guy comes along and he's taking all the credit, not particularly happy about it, but this is another way for me to expand my business and I need to do this, then that's what I'm going to do. It's somebody who's basically making choices for herself instead of just saying, nah, all right, I'll go do something else. No, she's good at this. She knows she is. She shows she's good at this throughout the show. And he can't operate without her. Whatever bows he's taking amongst the public, between them, they know that she's the one that's in charge. There's no question that she's the one that's she's doing all the work. And I think for me watching it at that age, it spoke to me. It said something to me about making a choice for myself in whatever endeavor it may be, and to see a woman in charge. She's in charge.
Absolutely. It was very inspiring.
And that is true. That in interviews, both Michael Gleason and Stephanie Zimbalist have talked about how many women have come forth to say how iconic, how important, and how vital it was to see Laura Holt's character, that they, for the first time, saw somebody they could aspire to. It was a single woman making choices for herself. And again, if we look at Heart to Heart, if we look at Scarecrow Mrs. King, she's already identified with as being married or unmarried or divorced or in the role of connection to a man. This is a woman that basically, because there's not a man in her life, and she does not want a man in her life necessarily, she just basically puts up an interesting poster, basically, and then continues to do the work. So and that's why I think it's complex. That's why I will say it is both. It is both feminist and not feminist. And in fact, I'm not the only one that said that. So they talk about the fact that this journalist, and we're going to get into her in one of our other episodes, because she wrote famously about how much the show meant to her and then felt bad about that because she also was. But I'm still not sure the show is feminism. Is it feminism or is it chauvinism? And the creators have talked about that. And here's why I will say it is not feminist. Because as lovely as they are, and from everything I hear, Michael Gleason, Robert Butler, lovely people, fabulous men, but they weren't making a feminist show. And a feminist show doesn't need to be an issue show or whatever. It needs to be a female-driven show.
Like Cagney and Lacey.
Like Cagney and Lacey. Well, which we're going to find out when we get there. I think on this, it looks like a feminist show. I think it's a feminist show. We're going to find out. But what's funny is it's not clear in this exploration. There are arguments both ways. For them, they were like, I don't really know. Does this, come down on either gender? They were like, it's just a clever old lady operating in a field not usually for women, and he's a lovable con man. And then there's a beat in this interview, and he says, when she's scheming, she's really cute, isn't she? And he means it as a compliment. It is a compliment, but it is also demeaning.
Well, there's no question, but that the people who made the shows behind the scenes may or may not have any intent to make a feminist show. I don't care about that. What I care about is, what did they make and what reaction did I have to it? And we've only talked about the professional side of Laura Holt. But one of the other things about this show that I think made it very feminist is, here she is, a single woman. She makes no bones about the fact that she's not necessarily interested in getting married. Never says anything about whether or not she wants to have kids. Doesn't seem to be on her radar, certainly not at this point. As I said earlier, she and Steele had several conversations about the nature of their relationship, and she was very clear about what she wanted and what she didn't want in a relationship with him, because she didn't trust him or know exactly, she didn't feel like she had enough information about him. You don't really get to see women basically standing up and saying, here's what I want. Here's what I don't want. Whether they intended it or not, that's what we got. That's what I got.
And so I think you're right. What the artist intends isn't always what the audience is going to receive. And I do think that they were a little surprised about it. And you can hear it in the commentary. Here's another quote from the commentary. We had no idea it was about identity. She created him, but as soon as he shows up, she disappears. It's so interesting. They suddenly found it interesting, this element of the show that felt built into the show for me as a person in watching the show, that they're like, it's kind of about identity, isn't it? And you're like, because again, this was a time when you had to churn entertainment for television, and you just had to come up with a great idea and run with it. And it was a lot about the mystery, and it was a lot about the things. So I give them credit for doing things they didn't even know they were doing. And I think that is casting. And I think it does come down to, they cast the right person in that role to make sure, to fight for that role and make sure it remains feminine, because it starts to veer off. In that first season, he is driving the bus. There's literally in the pilot, and it's really, really adorable moment in the pilot where literally they're chasing the bad guy and they jump on a little golf cart, because those are everywhere apparently in the 80s, is little maintenance golf carts. And he just gets into it first, and she jumps on the back and then literally reaches over him to like drive the car with him. And it's really adorable that basically she's from the back seat of this little, golf cart driving the car. And that is what, to me, like what the show is about, is she's still in the back seat and she's trying to drive the car and he's trying to drive the car. And so it's sort of about both. The network was not making a feminist show.
Of course they weren't.
Gleason also talks about how the network was always excited and looking for the quote unquote itchy scene. And I couldn't figure out what they were talking about until I realized they were talking about they wanted her to be sexually forward and sexually frustrated because she wanted to have sex with him, but she couldn't. That's what the network got excited about. And it does make you a little crazy because you're like, okay, just because feminism is not writing a sexually forward woman. That's what feminism was in the 80s. It, in some ways, still is. Mm-hmm. It's giving a male trait to a character.
You're being very kind.
It was about her also being this cute little thing that, look, she's going to be a detective. She's plucky.
She's very plucky. And it may be because that I'm rewatching season 3 and 4. I do not have season 1 and 2.
You started in the deep end.
Yeah. I started in the deep end.
And again, their relationship kind of takes over the show in a lot of ways. It's still case of the week, but what we care about is the relationship. As an audience member, I think it's fun to watch the mysteries, and every once in a while you have one that's really great. But it's just so interesting to hear the creators talk about their own show and recognize that maybe they didn't even know what they were creating.
I have to say that doesn't surprise me in the least, that they had no idea.
Yeah, me neither.
They just wanted to make a good show, and whatever they needed to do or what direction they needed to go to make it good, that was their prime directive. And if it happened to turn out to be feminist, great. If it didn't, that's fine too. They just wanted to make what they thought was a good show, make the network happy, keep the trains running, so to speak. So does not surprise me in the least. And again, at the end of the day, I don't care.
And you don't care because what it speaks to you is most important. And again, that Laura Holt character was an icon of feminism and still is, and still speaks to people, particularly people that were growing up in the 80s, women that were growing up in the 80s, trying to figure out, how do I want to be in the world? It gave another model for that. And is an incredibly important character.
Just like Mary Tyler Moore.
Moore. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting. So by the numbers, should we do some numbers?
Sure.
All right. Because I like to look at the numbers because then we really know. So for 5 seasons, Remington Steele, out of 43 writers listed, how many female writers do we think there will be, Sharon?
No, not that many.
Not that many. Melissa, you want to take a guess?
I have no idea.
Okay. I count 9 female writers for the show. Robin Bernheim, who co-wrote an episode with Stephanie Zimbalist in season 3, comes on to season 4, actually, and is on the show. So she ends up writing more than anyone else on the show. Susan Baskin wrote on the show more than one episode and talks about that was like her first big television writing job and has gone on. Both of them have had really incredible careers. Everybody else is one episode or maybe like 2 story buys. But again, this was the beginning of the transition from, I think in this show, they did have staff, right? Robin Bernheim came on to the show as a writer, but most of the episodes were created by freelance writers who would come in and pitch a show. And they would inevitably for these shows be kind of the mystery writers and the detective writers. And again, very male-driven show kinds of writing. I didn't say that right. I'm trying to speak so carefully now. Out of 24 directors on Scarecrow Mrs. King, we only had 1 female director, Miss Kate Jackson herself. She directed 2 episodes on Scarecrow Mrs. King. The rest of the directors were male. On Remington Steele, there were 24 directors listed, and there were 3 female directors listed. I'm going to give them a little nod for that, though there were no female producers listed. One of the directors is a renowned director who's gone on and directed all sorts of things. And Gabrielle Beaumont, she's British. And we are going to try to see if we can chase her down and get her on the show. We'll see. I have no idea. It would be great because she looks amazing. There's one female editor out of the 11 editors, Susan B. Browdy. And there were 3 second unit directors that were women. Again, I think that's actually a pretty good ratio, but I don't know because I just started this little game that I'm going to play on all the shows we look at.
I don't have any numbers, but for the time, I would say that that's probably pretty good, or at least good. Let's call it a good.
Let's call it a good. Sharon, do you want to tell us about our special guests that we're going to have coming up on some of our next shows?
I am beyond thrilled to say that we are going to be speaking with Robin Bernheim, who Susan just mentioned was Stephanie Zimbalist's writing partner for an episode of season 3 and then came back on staff in season 4. She and Stephanie are childhood friends, had known each other for a long time, and came up with this idea for the script that they worked on between season 2 and season 3, I believe it was. And that episode is actually one of my favorites. So looking forward to that. And as it happens, we are also going to be speaking with Stephanie Zimbalist herself.
I'm so excited.
Beyond excited. Beyond excited. I'm speechless. I really am.
We're going to have to figure out how to speak when we get to,
Indeed.
to that.
It's probably going to be a good thing that it's going to be over Zoom, that she's not going to be in the room because I don't know what I would do. I probably would just sit in the corner and just, have a crazy grin on my face, looking like a psycho. So this is probably a good thing.
I am super excited. If you had said to 1984 Susan, you would be talking with Stephanie Zimbalist in 2022, I would have been like, what are you talking about?
I would have said the same thing if you told me that last year. So
there you go.
I mean,
true that. That's absolutely true for me too. How do we get here?
Just going to have to learn how to try to compose myself and try to come across as being a rational, reasonable human being.
We're going to pretend. We'll just make it up.
Exactly.
We'll invent rational human beings to be in front of us, like Remington Steele.
Exactly. I will become have my own Remington Steele facade that looks and walks and talks like a rational human being while behind the scenes, I'm just losing it. So,
well, and we have a lot to talk about Remington Steele. We're going to get into some of the other seasons. We're going to get into the guest stars in some of our next episodes. We're going to get into stunts and clothing. We're really excited for what's coming next. We're going to get into hats and hair. Stephanie Zimbalist and Pierce Brosnan's hair.
They both had some pretty beautiful hair going on.
Amazing hair.
They're pretty beautiful.
Oh, yeah. Well, just starts and ends there, doesn't it?
Yes. But so, tune in, stay tuned, send us your questions. And I think we got to head into our wrap up. It's time to wrap it up. We want to hear from you. What do you think of Remington Steele? Is it feminist? Is it chauvinistic? Is it both?
Let us know on the website, 80stvladies.com, and on social media at 80stvladies.
We hope you will be joining us for the next episode, where we will be interviewing writer-producer Robin Bernheim.
We are so looking forward to it. Please send us your questions as we continue our dive into Steele, Remington Steele.
I like that. We hope 80s TV Ladies brings you joy and laughter and lots of fabulous new and old shows to watch, all of which we hope leads us forward to being amazing ladies of the 21st century.
See you next time.